Maya Rodriguez wiped down table 17 for the third time that afternoon. Not because it was dirty, but because standing still made her think too much. And thinking led to remembering. And remembering led to that hollow ache in her chest that never quite went away. She was 28 years old and had been working at the Grand Manor for 3 years now. 3 years of carrying heavy trays, smiling at strangers, and pretending that the smell of expensive perfume and wine didn't remind her of a life she once thought she'd have. The Grand Manor wasn't just any restaurant. It was the kind of place where reservations were made months in advance, where businessmen closed million-dollar deals over steak dinners, where politicians held private fundraisers in the crystal chandeliered ballrooms, where women wore dresses that cost more than Maya made in 6 months. Maya had learned to move through this world like a shadow. Quiet, efficient, invisible in her black slacks and white button-down shirt. She knew exactly how to angle a wine glass on the table. She knew which guests wanted conversation and which ones preferred to be left alone. She knew how to smile politely when someone snapped their fingers at her like she was a dog. Her co-workers were nice enough. There was Tommy, the young guy who was saving up for culinary school, and Rita, the single mom who always took the late shifts because they paid better, and old Mr. Chen, who'd worked in restaurants his whole life and could carry 4 plates at once without breaking a sweat. They'd grab coffee together before shifts. They'd complain about difficult customers. They'd laugh about the crazy things that happened in the kitchen. But Maya never told them about her life before the Grand Manor, never mentioned where she came from or what she'd given up. It was easier that way. Cleaner. Every morning, Maya woke up at 5:30 in her small studio apartment. She'd make instant coffee and eat toast while standing at the counter. Then she'd take 2 buses across the city to get to work by 7. Most days she worked a double shift, sometimes even longer when they were short-staffed. The money went to her younger brother, Daniel. He was 22 now, in his final year at State University studying engineering. He was brilliant, always had been, and Maya was determined to make sure he finished school no matter what it cost her. Their parents had died 4 years ago. A car accident on a rainy Tuesday evening. One moment they were here. The next they were gone. Just like that. No warning, no goodbyes. Maya still remembered the phone call. The way her hands had started shaking. The way the hospital waiting room had smelled like disinfectant and despair. The way Daniel had cried so hard he couldn't breathe. What people didn't know, what Maya never talked about, was that when her parents died, she'd been in her final year at the Riverside Conservatory of Music, one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. She'd won a full scholarship when she was 18. Her piano professor had called her a prodigy, said she had the kind of talent that only came along once in a generation. The piano had been Maya's whole world. She'd started lessons when she was 5 years old. Her mother, who'd played piano in church, had taught her the first basics. By the time Maya was 10, she was winning local competitions. By 15, she was performing at recitals that professional musicians attended. The piano wasn't just something Maya did. It was who she was. When she played, the rest of the world disappeared. All the noise, all the stress, all the worries. It all melted away, and there was only the music. Only the way her fingers danced across the keys. Only the pure, perfect sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her soul. At the conservatory, Maya had thrived. She practiced 8 hours a day. She studied under master pianists. She performed in prestigious venues. Her senior recital was scheduled for May. After graduation, she had plans to audition for symphony orchestras. Maybe even pursue a master's degree in Vienna or Paris. Then the accident happened. Everything changed in one terrible night. Suddenly there were funeral costs, medical bills from the emergency room, her parents' mortgage, Daniel's tuition. The list went on, drowning Maya in numbers she couldn't afford. The scholarship covered her tuition, but nothing else. She had no way to pay for everything and finish school. Daniel was only 18, barely starting college. He couldn't drop out. He'd worked too hard, so Maya made a choice. She sold her piano, the beautiful Yamaha Grand that her parents had saved for years to buy her. It had been sitting in their living room, and every time Maya looked at it, she saw her mother's face. But she sold it anyway, along with most of her parents' belongings. She withdrew from the conservatory 2 months before graduation, told her professors there was a family emergency. They'd begged her to reconsider, to take a leave of absence, to come back. But Maya never did. She found the job at the Grand Manor because it paid better than most restaurants. She rented the cheapest apartment she could find. She sent every extra dollar to Daniel, and she never touched a piano again. At first, the silence had been unbearable. Her fingers would itch for the keys. She'd hear music in her head and have nowhere to put it. She'd walk past music stores and feel like she couldn't breathe. But after 4 years, the ache had dulled to a quiet, constant throb. She'd learned to push it down, to ignore it, to focus on the practical things. Paying rent, buying groceries, making sure Daniel had everything he needed. Daniel didn't know the whole truth. He knew Maya had left school after their parents died, but he thought she'd just needed a break. He thought she planned to go back someday. Maya let him believe it. It was easier than explaining that some doors once closed, never opened again. Now as Maya finished cleaning table 17, she glanced at the clock. It was 4 in the afternoon, and the evening shift was about to start. Tonight was the big charity gala, the one everyone had been talking about for weeks. Margaret Ashford, one of the richest women in the state, was hosting the event. 200 guests. Dinner prepared by a celebrity chef, a live auction, and the highlight of the evening, a piano performance by some famous concert pianist from Europe. Victor something. Maya hadn't paid much attention to the details. The event coordinator had been running around like a chicken with its head cut off for days. Extra flowers, special lighting, 1,000 tiny details that apparently mattered to very rich people. Maya had been assigned to work the main ballroom. It meant better tips, but also more demanding guests. She'd need to be on her best behavior. Smile wider, move faster, be even more invisible than usual. She headed to the back to grab fresh napkins, passing by the ballroom on her way. Through the open doors, she could see the stage being set up. And there, gleaming under the soft lights, was the most beautiful piano she'd ever seen. A Steinway concert grand. 9 feet of polished black perfection. Maya stopped walking without meaning to. Her feet just refused to move. She hadn't been this close to a piano in 4 years. Hadn't let herself be. It hurt too much. But standing there, staring at those keys, Maya felt something crack open inside her chest. Something she'd been keeping locked away for so long she'd almost forgotten it existed. For just a moment, she let herself remember what it felt like. The weight of the keys under her fingers. The vibration of sound traveling up her arms. The way the whole world could shift with a single chord. Then Rita called her name and the moment shattered. Maya shook her head, turned away from the piano, and got back to work. She had tables to set. Glasses to polish. A job to do. The piano was someone else's world now. Not hers, not anymore. The ballroom looked like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting warm light across tables draped in cream silk. Centerpieces of white roses and orchids sat perfectly arranged on every surface, the kind of flowers that cost more than Maya's monthly rent. She adjusted her bow tie for the 10th time, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. Big events always made her anxious. Too many things could go wrong. Too many important people watching your every move. Rita appeared beside her, balancing a tray of champagne glasses. "You ready for this circus?" she whispered, rolling her eyes. Mrs. Chen from the kitchen said there are 3 state senators coming tonight, and apparently some movie actress. Can't remember which one. Maya managed a small smile. Just another Saturday night, right? Yeah, except these people tip in hundreds instead of 20s. So smile pretty and don't spill anything on the governor's wife. Rita winked and headed toward the entrance where guests were starting to arrive. The first hour passed in a blur of champagne service and polite small talk. Maya moved through the crowd like she'd been trained to do, offering drinks, clearing empty glasses, never making eye contact for too long. The guests were dressed in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Diamonds glittered on wrists and necks. The air smelled like expensive cologne and money. At the center of it all was Margaret Ashford herself. She had to be in her 60s with silver hair swept into an elegant bun and a kind face that crinkled when she smiled. Maya had served her before at smaller events. Unlike many wealthy people who looked through servers like they were furniture, Mrs. Ashford always said please and thank you. Always asked how your day was going and actually seemed to listen to the answer. Tonight, Mrs. Ashford was glowing. This charity gala was her passion project. All the money raised would go to children's hospitals across the state. She'd been planning it for months, calling it the event of the year. And from the looks of things, she'd succeeded. The room was packed with the city's elite, all ready to open their wallets for a good cause. Maya was refilling champagne glasses at table 12 when she heard raised voices coming from backstage. She glanced over and saw the event coordinator, Jennifer Chen, talking urgently into her phone. Her face had gone pale and she was gesturing wildly with her free hand. Something was wrong. Maya continued her rounds, but she kept one eye on the backstage area. More people were gathering there now. The venue manager, the catering director, they all looked panicked. Then Maya saw the paramedics arrive. 2 of them, moving quickly through the staff entrance with their equipment. They disappeared backstage and Maya's stomach dropped. Tommy rushed past her, nearly bumping into her tray. "Did you hear?" he hissed. The piano guy collapsed. "They think it's food poisoning." "What?" "Viktor Romanov, the famous pianist. He's being taken to the hospital right now." "The performance is canceled." Maya's mouth went dry. She looked toward the stage where that beautiful Steinway still sat, waiting. The performance was supposed to start in 30 minutes. It was the centerpiece of the entire evening. The reason half these people had paid $5,000 a plate to be here. Jennifer Chen was now talking to Mrs. Ashford, and even from across the room, Maya could see the devastation on the older woman's face. Her hands were pressed to her chest. She looked like she might cry. Maya moved closer, pretending to check the champagne station near the stage. She could hear fragments of the conversation. "Tried every pianist in the city. Saturday night. They're all booked. Maybe we can play recorded music instead." No, that's not the same. People were expecting a live performance. Victor is world famous. How do we replace that? Mrs. Ashford's voice was thick with emotion. "It's not just about the entertainment. The performance was supposed to inspire people, to remind them why the arts matter, why we need to support music programs in hospitals." Her voice cracked. "I wanted it to be perfect." Maya felt something twist in her chest. She knew that feeling. That desperate desire to create something beautiful, to use music to touch people's hearts, to make them feel something real. She stood there frozen as the chaos continued around her. Guests were starting to notice something was wrong. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Jennifer was on her phone again, frantically calling anyone who might be able to help. But Maya could tell from her face that it was hopeless. The Steinway sat there on stage, silent and waiting. Beautiful and useless without someone to play it. Maya's hands started to shake. A voice in her head, one she hadn't heard in 4 years, whispered, "You could do it. You could play?" No, absolutely not. That was insane. She was a waitress. She hadn't played piano in years. Her fingers would probably forget everything. She'd embarrass herself in front of 200 people, rich, important people. She'd probably get fired. Besides, who would even believe her? She'd walk up to them in her server uniform and say, "What? Excuse me, I know I'm just the help, but I used to be a concert pianist." They'd laugh in her face, but Mrs. Ashford looked so heartbroken. And this wasn't just about entertainment. This was about raising money for sick children, for giving them access to music and art when they needed it most. Maya thought about her mother, who'd taught her the first piano pieces, who'd driven her to lessons and competitions, who'd believed in her talent even when Maya doubted herself. Her mother would have done anything to help children in hospitals. She'd had that same kind of generous heart. The paramedics were leaving now, wheeling Viktor Romanov out on a stretcher. He looked green and miserable, an IV already attached to his arm. Poor guy, but his departure made everything real. There was no performance, no backup plan, just a beautiful piano and 200 disappointed guests. Jennifer Chen looked like she might have a breakdown. She was scrolling through her phone with shaking hands, but Maya knew she wouldn't find anyone. Not this late. Not on a Saturday night when every professional musician in the city was already booked. Maya took a deep breath. Then another. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was crazy, absolutely crazy. But her feet started moving anyway, carrying her toward the small group gathered near the stage. Rita shot her a confused look as she passed. Tommy mouthed, "Where are you going?" Maya didn't answer. She just kept walking until she was standing a few feet away from Jennifer and Mrs. Ashford. Up close, she could see tears gathering in the older woman's eyes. "Excuse me," Maya said quietly. Jennifer didn't even look at her. She was too busy typing another message on her phone. "Excuse me," Maya repeated louder this time. Jennifer glanced up, irritated. Not now. We're dealing with a crisis, I know. That's why I'm here. Maya's voice came out stronger than she felt. I can play. Jennifer blinked. What? The piano. I can play it. For a long moment, nobody said anything. Jennifer looked at Maya like she'd suddenly sprouted a second head. Mrs. Ashford's eyes widened. I don't have time for jokes right now, Jennifer said sharply. We have a real problem to solve. I'm not joking. Maya's hands were still shaking, but she forced herself to meet Jennifer's eyes. I studied at the Riverside Conservatory. I was in my final year. I can play. You're a waitress. Jennifer said it like that explained everything. I'm a waitress now, but I was a pianist before. Maya turned to Mrs. Ashford, whose face had gone from devastated to curious. I can do this. I know I can. Mrs. Ashford studied her for a long moment, really looked at her, maybe for the first time despite all the times Maya had served her at events. What's your name, dear? Maya Rodriguez. And you're serious? You can actually play at this level? Maya thought about lying, about making herself sound more confident than she felt, but instead she just told the truth. I don't know if I can play at Victor Romanov's level, but I can play well. I promise you that. And right now, well is better than nothing, isn't it? Jennifer started to protest, but Mrs. Ashford held up her hand. The older woman looked at Maya, really looked at her, and something passed between them. An understanding, a desperate hope. How long since you've played? Mrs. Ashford asked softly. Maya swallowed hard. 4 years. The words hung in the air. 4 years. It might as well have been forever. 4 years of silence, of locked-away dreams, of pretending that part of her life had never existed. Show me your hands, Mrs. Ashford said suddenly. Maya held them out, confused. They were shaking slightly, but Mrs. Ashford took them gently, turning them over. Looking at Maya's fingers, they were the hands of a waitress now, with a few small cuts and the rough skin that came from constant work. But underneath, if you knew what to look for, they were still the hands of a pianist, long fingers, strong from years of practice. Mrs. Ashford looked up, and there were tears in her eyes now, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. Jennifer, she said firmly, let her try. But Mrs. Ashford, let her try. The steel in her voice surprised everyone. We have nothing to lose. And maybe, she looked at Maya again, maybe everything to gain. Maya had exactly 5 minutes to get ready. 5 minutes to transform from a waitress into a performer. 5 minutes to figure out what she'd just gotten herself into. Jennifer grabbed her arm and practically dragged her toward the staff changing room. If this goes badly, we're both getting fired, she muttered, though there was something almost hopeful in her voice now. Desperate hope, maybe, but hope nonetheless. Rita caught up with them in the hallway. What's happening? Maya, where are you going? I'm playing the piano, Maya heard herself say. The words sounded insane coming out of her mouth. Rita's eyes went huge. You're what? No time to explain. Rita, I need help. Do you have anything I could wear? Anything black and nice. Rita didn't ask questions. She just nodded and ran toward her locker. That was the thing about people who'd worked in restaurants together for years. You learn to trust each other in a crisis. You learn to move fast and ask questions later. 2 minutes later, Maya was pulling on Rita's black dress. It was simple, nothing fancy, but it was clean and appropriate. Rita was a bit taller, so the hem fell just right. Maya's hands fumbled with the zipper, her fingers clumsy with nerves. You can actually play piano? Rita asked, helping with the zipper. I used to. Maya's voice came out as a whisper. A long time ago. Then you've got this. Rita squeezed her shoulder. Go show those rich people what you're made of. Maya didn't have time to fix her hair properly. She just pulled it out of her work bun and let it fall around her shoulders. No makeup, no jewelry. Just her and her shaking hands and 4 years of silence she was about to break. When she walked back out, Jennifer was waiting. The guests are getting restless. Mrs. Ashford is going to announce you in 1 minute. Are you sure about this? Was she sure? No, not even a little bit. But she nodded anyway. They walked toward the stage entrance together. Maya could hear the murmur of 200 conversations happening at once. Through the curtain, she could see the ballroom full of elegant people in their beautiful clothes, sitting at their perfectly set tables, expecting world-class entertainment. Her stomach lurched. What had she been thinking? These people had paid thousands of dollars to hear Victor Romanov. one of the most famous pianists in Europe. And instead they were getting her. A waitress who hadn't touched a piano in 4 years, who'd sold her instrument and buried her dreams and tried to forget she'd ever been anything other than ordinary. She felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Ashford had appeared beside her, and up close Maya could see the kindness in her eyes, the same kindness she'd shown every time Maya had served her, even when she didn't know Maya's name. "I don't know your story yet," Mrs. Ashford said softly, "but I can see in your eyes that you've loved music. That's all that matters. Not perfection, not fame, just love. That's what these people need to feel tonight." "Can you give them that?" Maya thought about her mother, about the first time she'd sat at a piano, so small her feet didn't reach the pedals, about the way music had felt like coming home, about the years of practice and passion and joy, about everything she'd lost and everything she'd locked away. "Yes," she whispered. "I can try," Mrs. Ashford smiled. Then she walked out onto the stage. The conversations in the ballroom quieted. Maya watched from behind the curtain as Mrs. Ashford stood at the microphone, graceful and composed despite the chaos of the last half hour. "Good evening, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your dinner." Her voice was warm, but Maya could hear the nervousness underneath. "As many of you may have heard, we've had an unexpected change in tonight's program. Our guest performer, Viktor Romanov, has unfortunately fallen ill and was taken to the hospital. We wish him a speedy recovery." Disappointed murmurs rippled through the crowd. "However," Mrs. Ashford continued, "we are incredibly fortunate to have found a last-minute replacement. Please join me in welcoming Maya Rodriguez to the stage." The applause was polite but confused. Maya could hear the whispers starting immediately. "Who? Never heard of her. Is she famous? Why does she look so young?" Jennifer gave her a small push. "Go. Now." Maya's legs felt like they were made of water, but they carried her forward anyway. She stepped through the curtain and into the bright lights of the stage. 200 faces turned to look at her. 200 pairs of eyes, some curious, some skeptical, some openly confused. She could see people leaning toward each other, whispering. A few were frowning. She didn't look like a concert pianist. She looked like exactly what she was, a young woman in a borrowed dress, terrified out of her mind. The walk to the piano felt like it took forever. Each step echoed in her ears. The room was so quiet now she could hear the rustle of expensive fabric as people shifted in their seats. She reached the bench and sat down carefully. The Steinway was even more beautiful up close. The keys seemed to glow under the lights. She adjusted the bench, buying herself a few more seconds. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling. The ballroom held its collective breath. Maya closed her eyes. She thought about her mother, about her father, about Daniel, who was probably studying in his dorm room right now, completely unaware that his sister was about to either triumph or fail spectacularly in front of the city's elite. Then she thought about the music itself, about the pieces that had lived inside her for so long, just waiting, about the silence she'd carried for 4 years, heavy as a stone. It was time to let it go. Her fingers touched the keys, and muscle memory took over. She began with Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the first piece her mother had taught her when she was 12 years old. It started soft, almost a whisper, a melody that felt like moonlight on water. The notes came easier than she'd expected. Her fingers remembered even when her mind was racing. The piano's tone was magnificent, rich and full and warm. She let herself sink into the music, into the familiar patterns her hands knew by heart. She'd forgotten how good it felt, how right, like breathing after holding your breath for too long. The whispers in the audience stopped. She could feel the shift in the room, the way people leaned forward instead of back, the way the skepticism began to dissolve into curiosity, then into something else, something deeper. Maya opened her eyes but didn't see the audience anymore. She just saw the keys, the way they dipped and rose under her fingers. She transitioned into the second movement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most emotional pieces ever written. Her professor had always said she played Rachmaninoff with unusual depth for someone so young. "You play like someone who's known loss," he'd told her once. Well, now she had. The music poured out of her like water from a broken dam. 4 years of grief. 4 years of sacrifice and silence and swallowed dreams. 4 years of pretending to be someone smaller than she was. It all went into the keys, into the sound that filled the ballroom and made the crystal chandeliers seem to vibrate with resonance. She could feel tears on her face but didn't wipe them away. Her hands never stopped moving. She transitioned into Debussy's Clair de Lune, and the music became softer, more introspective. A meditation on beauty and loss and the way moonlight makes everything feel like a memory. Maya wasn't performing anymore. She was just existing in the music, letting it flow through her like she was just a vessel. Her technique was rusty in places. She could feel the spots where her fingers didn't quite have the strength they'd once had, where the timing wasn't perfectly precise. But somehow that made it more real, more human. She played pieces her mother had loved. Pieces that reminded her of late nights in the practice room at the conservatory. Pieces that felt like home and heartbreak all mixed together. At some point, she became aware that the room had changed. The energy was different. She risked a glance up and saw something she didn't expect. People were crying. Not just one or two, dozens of them. Women with mascara running down their carefully made-up faces. Men with their jaws tight trying to keep their composure. Even the servers standing along the walls had tears in their eyes. Rita was openly sobbing. Mrs. Ashford sat in the front row with both hands pressed to her heart, tears streaming down her face. Maya didn't understand it. Her playing wasn't perfect. She'd made mistakes, missed notes. But somehow that didn't matter. Somehow the raw emotion of it, the honesty of it, had reached something inside these people, had reminded them of something they'd forgotten in their busy, complicated lives. That music could make you feel. That vulnerability was beautiful. That some things mattered more than money or status or perfection. She played for 45 minutes straight, transitioning from piece to piece without pause. She played until her fingers ached and her back hurt from sitting still so long. She played until she'd poured every drop of feeling inside her into the air. When she finally played the last note, letting it ring out and fade into silence, the ballroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Maya lifted her hands from the keys and sat there suddenly exhausted, suddenly aware of what she'd just done. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then the entire room exploded. People leapt to their feet. The applause was deafening, echoing off the high ceilings. It wasn't polite society clapping. It was real, raw appreciation. People were cheering. Some were still crying. The ovation went on, filling the space with sound. Maya stood up shakily and turned to face them, and the sight of 200 people on their feet for her, for the music she'd just shared, made her own tears fall faster. Mrs. Ashford rushed onto the stage and pulled Maya into a tight embrace. "Who are you?" she whispered into Maya's ear. "Who are you, really?" Maya didn't have an answer. She wasn't sure anymore. She'd been a pianist. Then she'd been a waitress. Now, for this one shining moment, she was both and neither and something entirely new. The applause continued. Maya looked out at all those faces, no longer skeptical or confused, just moved. Just human. And for the first time in 4 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find her way back to the person she'd once been, or maybe forward to someone even better. The standing ovation lasted almost 5 full minutes. Maya stood on that stage, overwhelmed and trembling, as wave after wave of applause washed over her. She didn't know what to do with her hands. Where to look, how to process what had just happened. Mrs. Ashford kept one arm around her shoulders as if afraid Maya might collapse. And honestly, Maya felt like she might. Her legs were shaking. Her heart was racing. The adrenaline that had carried her through the performance was draining away, leaving her feeling hollow and exposed. When the applause finally began to fade, people didn't return to their seats. Instead, they moved toward the stage. A crowd formed, everyone wanting to speak to her at once. A tall man in an expensive suit pushed his way to the front. "That was extraordinary," he said, pulling out a business card. "I'm David Chen. I produce music albums. We need to talk. I want to record you. Get your music out into the world." Before Maya could respond, a woman with sharp eyes and designer glasses stepped forward. "I manage the Symphony Hall downtown. We have a slot available next month for an emerging artist showcase. I'd love to feature you." Wait, another man interrupted. "Lawrence Foster Music Academy. Have you completed your formal training? We offer full scholarships for exceptional talent. You could finish your degree, pursue a master's even." The offers kept coming, one after another, each more incredible than the last. Recording contracts, performance opportunities, scholarships. People were shoving business cards into her hands faster than she could hold them. The cards fluttered to the floor and Maya just stared at the growing pile at her feet. This couldn't be real. 20 minutes ago she'd been serving champagne. Now music producers and concert hall managers were fighting over her? A flash went off in her face. Then another. People were taking photos, recording videos on their phones. Maya saw dozens of screens pointed at her, capturing this moment from every angle. "Please," Mrs. Ashford said firmly, holding up her hands. "Give her some space. She just played her heart out for all of you. Let her breathe." The crowd reluctantly backed up a few steps, but the excitement in the room was electric. People were talking over each other, already pulling out their phones to share what they'd just witnessed. Mrs. Ashford guided Maya off the stage and into a quiet corner near the kitchen entrance. Rita appeared immediately with a glass of water, and Maya drank it gratefully, her hand still shaking so badly she almost spilled it. "Maya," Mrs. Ashford said softly, taking both of Maya's hands in hers. "I need to know your story. All of it, please." So Maya told her about the conservatory, about her parents' accident, about Daniel and the choice she'd made, about selling her piano and walking away from music, about 4 years of silence and sacrifice and trying to forget who she'd once been. By the time she finished, Mrs. Ashford had tears running down her face again. "Oh, sweetheart, you gave up your dreams for your brother?" Maya nodded, her own tears starting again. "He's so smart. He deserves his chance. I couldn't let him lose his future just because I lost mine. But you shouldn't have had to choose. No one should have to choose between family and their calling." Mrs. Ashford squeezed her hands. "Does Daniel know what you sacrificed for him?" "No, I told him I just needed a break from school. I didn't want him to feel guilty. He was only 18 when our parents died. He was just a kid." Mrs. Ashford looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "Maya Rodriguez, I want you to listen to me very carefully. What you did tonight wasn't just about playing piano. You reminded everyone in that room what matters. You showed them that real talent, real passion, can't be bought or manufactured, and you did it with grace and humility and a depth of emotion that comes from real sacrifice." More people were approaching now. Jennifer appeared, looking dazed. "Maya, there are reporters here. They want to interview you, and people are already posting videos online. You're trending on social media." "I'm what?" Jennifer showed her the phone screen. Sure enough, there were already multiple videos of Maya's performance spreading across different platforms. Comments were pouring in by the hundreds. The headlines were forming in real time. "Mystery pianist stuns elite charity gala. Waitress delivers performance of a lifetime." Who is Maya Rodriguez? Maya felt dizzy. This was too much, too fast. Everything was spinning out of control. Her phone buzzed in the pocket of Rita's borrowed dress. She pulled it out with shaking hands. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages, and they were still coming in. The most recent text was from Daniel. "Maya, call me right now." Her stomach dropped. How did he already know? She stepped away from the crowd, her heart pounding, and called him back. He answered on the first ring. Maya. What the hell is happening? You're all over the internet. Someone from my dorm just showed me a video of you playing piano at some fancy event. That's you, right? Tell me that's you." Maya's throat was so tight she could barely speak. "Yeah, that's me." "You played piano? Since when do you play piano? Like actually play, not just messing around. You were incredible, Maya. I watched the whole video. You were like a professional." The tears came harder now. She couldn't hold them back anymore. "Daniel, I need to tell you something." Over the next 10 minutes, she told him everything. The whole truth she'd kept from him for 4 years. She heard his breath catch when she told him about the conservatory. Heard him start to cry when she explained why she'd left. By the end, they were both sobbing. "Maya, no. No, Daniel's voice broke. "You gave up the conservatory for me? Your scholarship? Your piano? Everything? You needed to finish school. You needed your chance, but you needed yours too. God, Maya, why didn't you tell me? I could have gotten loans. I could have worked. I could have figured something out. You were 18 and grieving. I couldn't put that on you. So you put it on yourself instead?" He was crying harder now. "You've been working at a restaurant for 4 years, sending me money, and you never told me what you gave up? How could you not tell me?" "I didn't want you to feel guilty. I wanted you to focus on your future. My future. What about yours?" His voice cracked. "You were going to be a concert pianist. That was your dream since you were 5 years old. And you You just threw it away for me? I didn't throw it away. I chose you. There's a difference. Daniel was quiet for a moment except for his ragged breathing. I don't deserve that kind of sacrifice. Yes, you do. You're my little brother. You're brilliant and kind and you have so much potential. Someone had to make sure you got your shot. But who was making sure you got yours? Maya didn't have an answer for that. They talked for 20 more minutes, both of them crying, both of them trying to process 4 years of secrets suddenly laid bare. Daniel told her he was proud of her and angry at her and heartbroken for her all at the same time. He said he'd graduate in a few months and get a job immediately, so she could go back to school. Maya tried to tell him that wasn't necessary, but he wouldn't hear it. You gave me 4 years, he said firmly, his voice stronger now. Now it's my turn. We're family. We take care of each other. You taught me that. When Maya finally hung up, she felt wrung out, exhausted but also lighter somehow. The secret she'd been carrying was finally out in the open. Daniel knew, and despite his guilt and his tears, he understood why she'd done it. She walked back into the ballroom, where the crowd had thinned a bit but people were still lingering, still talking about the performance. Rita rushed over and hugged her tight. Girl, you've been holding out on us. 3 years we've been working together and you never mentioned you were some kind of piano genius? Tommy appeared behind her, grinning. You know you're famous now, right? Like internet famous. Everyone in my group chat is talking about you. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Reporters wanted interviews. People wanted photos with her. Business cards kept accumulating. Mrs. Ashford stayed close, running interference when things got too overwhelming, making sure Maya had water and a moment to breathe between conversations. The restaurant manager pulled Maya aside at one point. That was remarkable, he said quietly. Truly remarkable. And I want you to know that whatever happens next, whatever opportunities come your way, you have our full support. If you need time off to pursue this, just say the word. Maya felt tears prick her eyes again. She'd cried more tonight than she had in 4 years combined. Thank you. That means a lot. But even as she said it, anxiety twisted in her gut. What did happen next? Did she just go back to serving tables on Monday, pretending tonight never happened? Did she take one of these offers and leap into the unknown? What about Daniel's tuition? What about rent and bills and all the practical things that didn't care about viral videos and standing ovations? By the time the event finally wound down, Maya was utterly exhausted. She changed back into her work clothes, said goodbye to Rita and Tommy, and caught her usual bus home. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friend requests. Messages from strangers. News outlets wanting interviews. The attention was overwhelming and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. When she finally made it back to her tiny studio apartment at midnight, she sat on her bed and stared at the pile of business cards she'd collected. Producers, managers, agents, scholarship programs. Each one represented a door opening, a possibility she'd thought was closed forever. But with every opportunity came questions, risks, uncertainties. Maya lay back on her bed, still in her work clothes, and stared at the ceiling. 12 hours ago, she'd been invisible, anonymous, safe in her quiet, predictable life. Now the whole world was watching. And she had absolutely no idea what to do next. 3 months later, Maya stood backstage at the Metropolitan Concert Hall, adjusting the sleeves of her deep blue gown. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the desperate fear of that night at the Grand Manor. This was anticipation, excitement, the good kind of nerves that came before something you'd worked incredibly hard for. Tonight was her debut concert. A real one. Advertised and ticketed and sold out weeks in advance. The title printed on every poster and program read, Maya Rodriguez Songs for Tomorrow. She could hear the crowd filing in, the murmur of hundreds of voices mixing together. Somewhere out there, Daniel was sitting in the front row. He'd driven 5 hours from university to be here, refusing to miss it for anything. He'd graduated 2 weeks ago with honors, already had a job lined up at an engineering firm. He'd kept his promise about taking care of himself so Maya could focus on music again. Mrs. Ashford was out there too, probably crying already knowing her. Over the past 3 months, Margaret Ashford had become more than just a sponsor. She'd become a mentor, a friend, almost like a second mother. She'd paid for Maya to complete her final semester at the Riverside Conservatory, hired the best teachers to help Maya rebuild her technique, opened doors that would have taken years to open on their own. But more than that, she'd believed in Maya when Maya barely believed in herself. The weeks after the charity gala had been overwhelming. The videos of Maya's performance had been viewed millions of times. News outlets ran stories about the waitress who'd stunned the elite. She'd been invited on talk shows, offered recording contracts, contacted by agents and managers who all promised to make her a star. It had been tempting. So tempting. But Mrs. Ashford had pulled her aside one day, looked her straight in the eye and said, "Don't rush. Fame is empty if you're not ready for it. Finish your education first. Build a foundation that can't be shaken. Then decide what kind of artist you want to be." So that's what Maya had done. She'd returned to the conservatory, walking through those familiar doors for the first time in 4 years. Her old professor had cried when he saw her. He'd thought he'd lost her forever to the cruel realities of life. But here she was, back and better than ever. It hadn't been easy. Her technique was rusty. Her fingers needed to rebuild strength. She had to relearn pieces she'd once known by heart. There were moments of frustration, nights when she wanted to quit, days when the gap between where she was and where she'd been felt impossibly wide. But she'd pushed through. And somewhere along the way, something had shifted. She wasn't playing to recapture who she'd been at 24. She was playing to become who she was meant to be at 28. Someone who'd known loss and sacrifice and had chosen to keep going anyway. 3 weeks ago, she'd walked across the stage in her graduation gown and finally received her diploma. Daniel had cheered so loudly the whole auditorium heard him.
Maya had laughed and cried at the same time. Now here she was, about to perform in one of the most respected concert halls in the state. A knock on the dressing room door pulled her from her thoughts.
5 minutes, Miss Rodriguez. Maya took a deep breath and looked at herself in the mirror one last time. The woman staring back looked different from the terrified waitress who'd stepped onto that stage 3 months ago. More confident, more sure of herself, but still humble, still grateful, still the same person who understood what it meant to struggle. She walked toward the stage entrance, her heels clicking on the polished floor. As she rounded the corner, she saw a familiar face waiting in the wings. Rita stood there in a beautiful dress, holding a bouquet of flowers. Tommy was beside her, grinning from ear to ear. And behind them were more faces from the Grand Manor. The manager who'd given her time off. The kitchen staff she'd worked alongside. Even Mr. Chen, who never missed a shift, had taken the night off to be here. "We couldn't miss this," Rita said, hugging her tight. "You're one of us. Always will be." Maya hugged them all, fighting back tears. She'd worried they might feel differently about her now, that success would create a distance between them. But they'd only been proud, only supportive. They understood better than anyone how hard she'd worked for this moment. The stage manager gave her the signal. It was time. Maya walked onto the stage, and the applause that greeted her was thunderous. The hall was packed, every seat filled. But this time Maya wasn't afraid. She walked to the piano with her head held high, waved to the audience, and sat down. The program she'd chosen for tonight was carefully curated. Pieces that meant something. Pieces that told her story. She started with Chopin's Nocturne, the same one she'd played that night at the gala. The same one her mother had taught her. But this time she played it differently, with more maturity, more understanding, with the weight of everything she'd learned in the years between. From there, she moved through the program, each piece flowing into the next. Classical masterpieces mixed with contemporary compositions, music that was technically challenging but also emotionally resonant. She played some pieces with her eyes closed, lost in the sound. Others with her eyes open, watching her fingers dance across the keys, marveling at how they remembered everything even when her mind doubted. During one of the softer pieces, she glanced at the audience and saw Daniel crying. Not sad tears, proud ones. The kind of tears that said, "I see you. I see what you did for me. I see who you've become." Toward the end of the program, Mrs. Ashford walked onto the stage. Maya hadn't known she was going to do this. The older woman took the microphone and Maya's hand stilled on the keys. "I need to interrupt for just a moment," Mrs. Ashford said, her voice echoing through the hall. "As many of you know, Maya's journey to this stage wasn't easy. She sacrificed her dreams to support her family, and in doing so, she taught all of us something about love and selflessness." Maya felt her cheeks flush. She hadn't wanted this to be about her story. She wanted it to be about the music, but Mrs. Ashford continued. Tonight, I'm announcing the creation of the Rodriguez Family Scholarship Fund. This fund will support talented music students who face financial hardship. Students who might otherwise have to choose between their education and their family responsibilities. Because no one should have to make the choice Maya made. The audience erupted in applause. Maya covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her face. Her parents' names. Their legacy living on through helping others. Mrs. Ashford looked at her with such warmth. Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become, and so am I. After Mrs. Ashford left the stage, Maya sat for a moment collecting herself. Then she turned back to the piano and played her final piece. Not from the printed program, but something she'd been working on for weeks. An original composition, the first piece of music she'd ever written. She called it 4 Years of Silence. It started quiet, almost hesitant. Like someone who'd forgotten how to speak. Then it built slowly, note by note, until it became something powerful and sure. It had moments of sadness, yes, but also moments of hope, of resilience, of rebirth. The piece told the story of losing something precious and finding it again, of sacrifice and reward, of silence and sound, of a girl who'd played piano in her childhood bedroom and a woman who played in concert halls. They were the same person, but also completely different. When the final note faded away, the hall was silent for a long moment. Then the standing ovation came, even bigger than before. People were on their feet, cheering, some crying. Maya stood and bowed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Later that night, there was a small reception. Maya spent hours talking to people, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. But the moment she treasured most was when Daniel pulled her aside, wrapped his arms around her and whispered, "Thank you. For everything. But especially for showing me what real strength looks like." 2 weeks after the concert, Maya returned to the Grand Manor. Not to work, but to perform at another charity gala. Mrs. Ashford had insisted, wanting to complete the circle of Maya's journey. Before the performance, Maya did something that surprised everyone. She put on a server's uniform one more time and personally served champagne to Rita, Tommy, Mr. Chen, and all her former co-workers. They laughed and protested, but Maya insisted. "I need to remember where I came from," she said simply. "This uniform doesn't define me, but it's part of my story, and I'm not ashamed of it." Then she changed into her concert gown and took the stage. This time, there was no skepticism in the audience. Only anticipation, only respect. As she played, Maya thought about how strange life was. How one moment could change everything. How the worst times could somehow lead to the best ones. How losing everything could teach you what really mattered. She thought about her mother and father watching from wherever they were. She hoped they understood why she'd made the choices she'd made. She hoped they were proud. She thought about the silence. Those 4 long years when she'd thought her music was gone forever. But the silence hadn't been wasted. It had taught her patience, humility, strength. It had taught her that she was more than just a pianist. She was a sister, a survivor, a person who could sacrifice for others and still find her way back to herself. When the performance ended, and the applause filled the ballroom once again, Maya stood and looked out at all those faces. Some of them had been there 3 months ago, witnessing the beginning of this journey. Others were new, drawn by her growing reputation. But what mattered wasn't the applause or the recognition. What mattered was that she'd found her voice again. Not just her musical voice, but her true voice. The voice that knew suffering and joy could exist together. That knew sacrifice was sometimes necessary, but didn't have to be forever. That knew you could lose yourself and still find your way home. As Maya took her final bow, she glanced to the side of the stage and saw something that made her smile. Mrs. Ashford had arranged for a small bronze plaque to be placed near the piano. It read, "This is where Maya Rodriguez reminded us that talent and opportunity can meet in the most unexpected places. May we never stop believing in second chances." Maya walked off the stage that night knowing her journey was just beginning. There would be more concerts, more challenges, more moments of doubt and triumph. But she was ready for all of it, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes you have to lose your voice to discover what you really have to say. And sometimes the silence isn't an ending. It's just the pause before a more beautiful song begins.